All right, so yeah, last one I really wanted to cover in depth is a cover letter that you would be writing to accompany a proposal to get funding for a particular project you're working on. If you're applying for funding for you as an artist, but it's not tied to a particular project, that's going to be more of the formatting of the letters that we've already talked about, because again, you're selling yourself as an artist. So it'd be the ordering of like the letter of interest. But I know most of the grants that I see through ARP are related to a particular project where you have to write the project description and everything, which we talked about with the last workshop. So we're going to be focusing on that in this portion because I think the other outlines apply for sort of personal artist funding. So this is project-based. This is what the funder is going to read first from your grant proposal, but it's what you should write last, because you're going to actually be incorporating a lot of the material from the larger proposal into your cover letter. There's not really new information in your cover letter. It's sort of like a summary of you in the project and the funds that you're asking for. And so it's easiest if you write it last so that you don't have to like revise it later once you have written the larger proposal. The length is 1 page usually. Sometimes they might give you a longer word count than that, but generally you can plan on 1 page. All right, so starts with the same header material. You've got your introduction and then your 2 body paragraphs. The first one talks about the project. The second one summarizes the funds that you're asking for and what they'll be used for. And then you have your summary and thanks. So introduction, again, 3-part. Only difference here is that instead of just summarizing you in that middle portion, you're also summarizing your project and why it's important, because you're asking for funding for that project. Your purpose sentence, I've given 2 examples here. So it might say something like, I write to submit my proposal for the name of your project for your review, or I write to apply for funding in support of my project, name the project. And then the summary of you might look like, and the project might look like something like this. So I am a cellist and teacher with 10 years of experience in orchestral performance, teaching, and community outreach. My upcoming project, Making Music Together, is a series of musical educational programs that seek to educate about musical diversity, increase participation in musical programs by students from underrepresented communities, and promote community bonding and acceptance. So you can see, in order to demonstrate the importance, this person, which is me, a fictional grant, but this person is choosing to focus on the goals of the project to sort of demonstrate why this is important. These are the things that we're wanting, the lofty things that we're hoping to achieve. Then the last sentence, as always, is your thesis statement for the letter. So this project perfectly aligns with the mission of the Money Bags Granting Institution in its goal to diversify music participation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right, second paragraph about the project. First, you're going to outline why it's needed. So sort of summarizing your statement of need, if you've got one of those in your proposal. Your goals for the project, and then how the project will achieve those goals. You're going to provide some like hard details about the project. So what actually happens? All you've said so far is that it's a music program, but tell us like more about what's going to actually happen in those programs. And then you might say where it fits in and builds on your career if you have the space. Now, I got carried away when making up this grant. If anyone wants to submit this grant, you're welcome to, because it's not real. But I wrote it kind of long. I'm going to just preface that with, oops. Let me get out of this again here. It's kind of long, so if I were the editor, I'd probably have to do some cutting here because this is probably going to exceed a page, but just so that you get the idea of some things that you might include in this paragraph. Our Making Music Together program seeks to strengthen rural communities in North Texas across demographic lines. So that's the main goal. Then they say the statement of need. So there's problems, and in short, that there's not enough diversity in the actual programming, and thus there's not a lot of diversity in the people participating in those programs. And so they're hoping that that last sentence there, we believe that diversifying programs will diversify participation, and then that will ultimately improve, outcomes. Then more detail on the project. So just sort of nuts and bolts of what it actually is. Through creating, participating, and learning about diverse music styles, dance styles, and instruments, participants will be invited to embrace the diversity of their community and each other. Okay. And then where it fits in with builds on your career, again, a little lengthy here, but this project builds on my previous work with blank. So if you are, and this is something I see in letters a lot, if you are referring to how your current project is building on a previous project, never just say like, oh, I did this sort of work before. You always want to then, if you're going to say that, always say, but this is how this one's different, right? Because if they're going to give you their money, they don't want you to just be doing the same thing, right? Unless you're like broadening your audience for the same thing, or so that's your goal. But if you're creating a new project, it's important to sort of say, okay, but this is now what I'm doing. So in that project, I did this, but this project is increasing my reach and effectiveness through connecting me with communities that benefit most. And then it will help me connect with new collaborators. And this expansion will also naturally lead to future collaborations and projects, which will ultimately progress my career. So not only is the fund going to make this project possible, but also, I'm going to be able to bring in more people, which is going to diversify it and also help me, right? Help my career. All right, so third paragraph is about the funds. And here you're just going to name the comprehensive amount that you're asking for. You do not have to break it down at all in the letter, because obviously you will break that down in the budget, and also probably in your project description. But you just say, we're asking for this amount. This will be used for blank here to hire collaborators, reserve event spaces, and market the events to each participating community. And then this person also says, and ultimately it's going to help us achieve this more lofty goal. So they're giving sort of a micro goal and a macro goal in terms of what the person will be funding. And it'll help us reach our primary audience of blank, whoever they are. And you can decide if you want to include that again, include the audience portion for space. That might be one of the first things that you cut, especially if they don't ask for you to define your audience in the application form, if it's an application form. But if they do, it might be a good thing to just mention in brief here. All right, then the summary and thanks, just a two-parter here. Restate the goals that they can help achieve, and then your concluding sentence and thanks. So with the support of the Moneybags Institution grant, this project will be able to reach and benefit communities and students most in need of diverse music programming and education. When you are restating these things, by the way, and I've said this a couple times, like, oh, restate your thesis here. Make sure it's not verbatim. You do want to rephrase these sentences when you restate them. And then also, we talked about this in the project descriptions webinar, but your wording in these letters, these cover letters for grants, make sure it sounds like you're inviting them to come along rather than like, without you, this won't happen, try to make it sound like you better jump on board because we're going places with or without you. Because it exudes sort of a confidence and like a determination of like, this is what I'm doing right now. So would you like to invest in this? Because that's what they're doing, right? And then the concluding sentence, thank you in advance. And this one I particularly like. So if you want to steal it, feel free. Let me turn this box so I can actually read it here. Okay, so it says, thank you in advance for your consideration and for providing artists like me with opportunities to make a difference in our communities. I like that. I think it's nice for just thanking them for providing money to artists in general, even if it's not you. I think that's a really nice move. And then, thank you for your consideration as well. Okay. And then of course your signature line and your enclosures if you have the space. There's a few things that you might mention if they're relevant to you. So if you've received previous funding from this granting institution for a different project, let's mention that there. I would mention that in the first paragraph actually, and that would just be an added sentence to the current outline, just because it's really important. And if they have given you funding for a project, you'll want to say what you did with it. So in 2018, I received funding for blah, blah, blah. With those funds, I reached blah, 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 blah. And if you can give hard numbers of how many people were affected, that's even better. And then any recent or previous interactions you've had with the funder. So if you've talked with them already about this project, you can mention that in your letter. And you want to mention if you have any other funding sources for this current project, and that would go in that funding paragraph. You would just say, we've already secured funding from so-and-so and so-and-so to cover blah, 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 blah. Your funds will be used for blah, 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 blah.